The eastern hallway of the southern aqueduct branch now fully explored, we returned west past the dining hall and toward a series of doors further to the west, stopping at the first door facing south. Opening the unlocked door, we found another supply room beyond, filled with dozens of wooden boxes all packed in neat and orderly piles. The same milky white, stony substance that covered everything we had encountered within the aqueduct covered the boxes as well, so opening a few to see what was inside wouldn't be easy. Curious about the contents of the boxes, several of my heroes first chiseled the milky white substance off of them before tearing into the crates directly. Inside, we found a variety of weapons, from maces and mauls to simple slings to wooden staffs. Unfortunately, the weapons had also been crystallized, so they were no longer useful. From the look of things, one could have supplied a small army with all the weaponry stashed here, if it hadn't already been destroyed in the mysterious crystallization process. Curiously, Sainayers noted that all the weapons here were intended for use by the cleric class, while fighters could have made use of such weaponry as well. We suspected that the items were specifically intended for use by clerics, a possible clue. Entering this chamber from the hallway leading north, it was like the supply room we had just entered to the south, a modest chamber containing all sorts of boxes and neatly stacked but covered in the same milky white substance we were now quite familiar with. We also noted that the boxes appeared similar in size, color, and construction to the ones holding all the ruined weapons, as if they had all come from the same source. Chiseling through the milky white material before cracking open the wooden crates, we eventually found all manner of armor and shields, from the simplest of leather armor to full plate armor, and from the smallest of wooden shields to several massive, metallic shields. Unfortunately, the armor and shields had all been crystallized and hence were ruined. "There is enough armor here to outfit a small army," Eswin commented. "Too bad it's all been destroyed by this whitish rock stuff." Yes, while the weapons and armor were destroyed now, they were in mint condition when originally stored here. Somebody paid quite a lot to buy only the finest. A moment later, one of the wooden crates violently exploded and a suit of armor somehow rose up out of the wrecked container, as if worn by an invisible warrior. A second suit of armor rose up as well, followed by a third crate explosion and additional suit of armor. As the suits of armor neared us, we could tell that they were being worn by what appeared to be crystalline humanoids. "I think they're some sort of elemental," Redfern shouted, "the monsters closing in. They'll be tough to destroy, we need to literally crush them." And with that, the three crystalline entities, each of which were now wearing ruined plate armor, marched forth to attack us, the sight rather comical but the situation quite serious. Attacking us with their mighty crystallized fists, the stone elementals were far more powerful than the living dwarven statues we had faced earlier, each attack capable of breaking our bones, crushing our skulls and otherwise doing tremendous damage. Like the dwarven statues earlier, they were very difficult to harm with edged weapons, forcing all of us to use blunt weapons against them instead. Relying on magic from Redfern, Sainayers and Kartha to help take the elementals down, they were soon reduced to piles of rubble and their plate mail exoskeletons were cracked and smashed beyond all usefulness as well. "Those elemental creatures were not of this world," Kartha suggested, concerned. "Something happened that either summoned them or let them loose. We'll probably encounter more." Taking a final look at one of the piles of rubble left behind by the crystal elementals, it appeared that a few valuable gems had somehow been mixed in with the debris. Hence, we recovered a little loot from the elemental monsters. Fairly small, the chamber here was an obvious workroom, filled with all manner of hammers, chisels, tables, vices and other tools and equipment used to cut, edge and otherwise work with stone. Like all the other rooms we had encountered so far, this one also had the milky white stony substance covering everything as if it were rampant mold. While everything here within the workroom was either not important or already ruined by the milky white substance, we did find an interesting black box in the far corner, its small door presently closed and locked. Without the right key, we had little hope of getting the box open. "It's a safe," Ariana observed, feeling around the box for any hidden buttons or switches. "I am guessing we're going to need a very special key to open it." "The safe looks important," Redfern added, admiring the dwarven craftsmanship. "Lam Tora, we should try that stone key we found earlier," Ariana then suggested. "I will bet it fits the keyhole here." Agreeing to try the key we found in the records room to the north, I carefully unlocked the safe and swung the small but surprisingly heavy door open. Inside the safe was a single, glowing item, what appeared to be an animal's horn, and I slowly retrieved the presumably magical item from its protective space. And what is this? Eswin wondered with suspicion, never trusting of anything magical. Carefully examining the horn, it didn't take long before we found some tiny runes, magical instructions that likely told more about the horn. Hoping Redfern could read the runes, I handed the device to him and allowed him several minutes to further review and inspect the item. The runes say something about exploding things with the horn. So, I say we've found ourselves a horn of blasting. And what does that do? Eswin asked, still cynical. Makes perfect sense, Redfern answered with a grin. The horn can blast through solid stone and even shatter crystal. I imagine the dwarves used the device when they couldn't otherwise break down or tunnel through a hard section of rock. Then maybe we should keep this horn in case we encounter some rock we need to get through, Eswin suggested. Is that wise? Sainairs asked, his thoughts on doing the right thing. This horn belongs to the dwarves, not us. We can return it to Lord Hefrallen when we see him again, Kartha added. I nodded in agreement. Redfern then handed the horn of blasting back to me as we departed the workroom. Reaching the far western end of the hallway, its eastern doors completely blown off and lying in the hallway at our feet, it was clear that some sort of massive explosion had occurred within. Entering the large chamber, it appeared that nothing of consequence remained, everything here had been destroyed, the area now full of ruined debris. Perhaps just as importantly, the same milky white substance we had found everywhere else throughout the aqueduct was not only here as well but, as far as we could tell, was thickest here, several inches of the stuff caked on every surface. It seemed that the white material somehow exploded outward from this very location. While not expecting to find anything of value within the chamber, it still took quite some time to thoroughly search the area, picking through the debris, closely examining the milky white substance on all the surfaces and trying to figure out what had happened here. We also noted that a long corridor led away into the darkness to the west. While we couldn't be sure, we suspected that the room had once been some sort of laboratory, as there were a lot of glass shards lying about as well as a wide variety of nearly disintegrated containers, tools, and equipment. The force of the blast that had occurred here must have been tremendous. Worse, we discovered bits and pieces of humanoid remains, likely dwarven but perhaps human as well, victims who were all but disintegrated within the chamber. While there was no way to be certain, we guessed that the room had been populated with several dozen such humanoids when the blast occurred, killing all of them instantly and unleashing the milky white substance throughout the aqueduct. I sense incredible magical power here all around us, Redfern commented, feeling about. Whatever exploded here, it was highly magical in nature. And exceedingly powerful, Kartha added, herself able to sense the lingering energies in the air as well. In fact, the young wizard deduced, I would say that the explosion here was pure magic, and it somehow crystallized everything throughout the aqueduct. I am just not sure about the details. I wonder where that leads? Ariana queried, pointing to the large, open area to the west. Taking a few minutes to explore, the opened area to the west was just as empty as the room here, the milky white substance dominating all the surfaces there as well. The area seemed to open into a massive cavern beyond, but we would need to actually travel further west to better explore it, so we returned to the blasted room again to decide our next course of action. Contemplating the seriousness of the disaster that had recently taken place here, we were all quite surprised to look up and suddenly find ourselves surrounded by a combination of dwarven guards and human clerics, likely a dozen or so in total. I immediately recognized the clerics as those we had just fought back in the reception hall, apparently all healed up, while the dwarves were likely a contingent of the city guards from above. All of them looked angry and ready to attack. A moment later, the same cleric leader stepped out from behind several of his Sislan brethren, a slight grin on his face as he withdrew his own magical mace. I didn't introduce myself last time, the cleric scoffed, now with reinforcements. I am Brother Sen, captain of the Paladins of Sisla. Shall we try this again? Who are the Paladins of Sisla? Sainairs demanded to know, taking a step forward. We are the future. Sen replied, just as a bully would ridicule his victims. It's time the Sislan way took the fight directly to its enemies, and the Paladins of Sisla will lead the way. But we are not your enemy, Eswin stated, confused. We even have a Sislan with us. He is no paladin, the pompous cleric ridiculed. And you're right, you aren't enemies. You're more like scapegoats, and all of you are about to die. The human clerics and dwarven fighters readied their weapons, almost eager to destroy us. Relying on my diplomacy skills, I tried to convince the clerics and dwarves to stand down. There was no reason to fight one another. Unfortunately, my plea fell on deaf ears. These adversaries had definitely come to fight. What are you hiding? Kartha demanded to know, perhaps onto something. What, exactly, has happened here that's made us the enemy? All eyes turned to Brother Sen, who grinned again, full of pride, almost bloodlust. As paladins of Sisla, we represent the power and the glory and the might of Sisla herself. For that, we needed the mightiest and most powerful of weapons, armor, and equipment, the greatest of arms and armor the world has ever seen, legions of silver-clad warriors, perfect in every way. And if you want the best, most magical, and powerful arms and armor in all the land, you go to the dwarves here in the Cyan Desert. Sure, of course. The dwarves here were well known throughout all Mariga for being one of the best artisans in crafting not just normal arms and armor but magical ones as well. If one were looking to equip a small army, asking the dwarves here to supply the arms and armor would be ideal. So, the Sislanway conscripted the dwarves of the Cyan Desert to outfit their new army, these paladins of Sisla as you call it, Eswin summarized, trying to make the connection himself. What's that got to do with us? Because something went terribly wrong as the magical arms and armor were being made, didn't it? Redfern intervened, beginning to understand. The explosion that occurred here, the magic that's still in the air, the statues standing about that are crystallized corpses. Something horrific happened down here, and the Sislanway is responsible. Brother Sen chuckled a bit, rather surprised that our party had guessed what had happened but not at all concerned. I suppose Supreme Healer Priest Dild may have gone a little too far in his demands for perfect arms and armor. And yes, the magic got a little out of control, resulting in what you see down here. It's even true that the magical blast crystallized the tears of blue itself and stopped the aqueduct from flowing. But it's all been worth it, for, as you can see, the paladins of Sisla have their arms and armor, and after we restore the aqueduct for the dwarves here, we will march upon all Mariga and drive abject fear into the very souls of our enemies. But first, the dwarves here need a scapegoat to blame their troubles on. Once all of you are dead, it will be easy to announce that the crystallization of the tears of blue was totally your fault, and that the Sislanway was able to defeat you, repair the aqueduct and restore everything back to normal. So, Lord Hefrallen never had any intention of letting us help him find the real cause of the missing water, Eswin condemned, sneering at Brother Sen. He let us down here only to be used as scapegoats by the likes of you. And now it's time to play your part, Sen hissed, commanding all his troops to attack. Time to die. As the dozen or so clerics and dwarves marched forward, we instinctively withdrew into a tight circle, back to back, and weapons at the ready. Despite how much we had grown as a party since our early days back in Tobin, we were quite outmatched and the situation looked grim. Quite desperate now, I reached into my pack and grabbed the magical horn of blasting, blowing into it with everything I had. The subsequent bellowing from the horn almost ruptured my eardrums and immediately stopped everyone in their tracks. Suddenly, the ground began to shake, as did the walls and even the ceiling, rumbling as if an earthquake were striking. The clerics and dwarves looked around, unsure of what was happening. Then, all the milky white substrate covering the floor, walls, and ceiling shattered, millions of tiny shards flying in all directions. As the clerics and dwarves had totally surrounded us, just by chance they had also protected us from most of the debris, the sharp bits whizzing into them instead and causing significant wounds. The rumbling finally ceased and the debris dissipated. Looking about, the clerics and dwarves still surrounded us but they had been wounded, even Brother Sen. Enraged by the sudden turn of events, Sen's unholy squad leaped at us to attack, my party fighting like never before to drive them away. Weapons flashed, shields clanged, and magic tore through the air, the battle lasting several fateful minutes. Soon, however, we managed to defeat nearly all our assailants. Again unwilling to fight to the death, Brother Sen ordered his paladins and dwarves to flee, the lot scampering away back to the east. While we didn't pursue them, I intuitively sensed that we hadn't seen the last of Brother Sen. Did you know about these paladins of Sisla? Kartha suddenly demanded of Sainairs, the mutant surprisingly angry. Are you also part of this plot to wreak havoc throughout Mariga in the name of your almighty Sisla? No. Sainairs replied, shocked by the accusation. I had no idea. I can scarcely even believe a supreme healer priest would do such a thing. There must be a more logical explanation to what we've heard down here. The logical explanation is that the Sislanway is becoming militant. Kartha replied, still quite angry. We may have stopped a few here in the aqueduct, but it sounds like there is a whole army of them preparing to swarm Mariga with their ego and self-righteous arrogance. I had to agree. In a volatile world with already enough violence and death, adding yet another group of fanatics, those looking to kill and maim all in the name of their cause, didn't seem like the way forward, and I was just as disappointed by the development of this Paladins of Sisla organization as Cartha was. Now what? Ariana asked, attempting to move the conversation along. We can't stay here for long, Eswin responded. The conspiracy between Hefralin, Dilt, these Paladins of Sisla and the like, there is nobody here in blue who would even believe us at this point. There is the inner circle wizard Voxar, Redfern suggested. I believe she can be trusted, and she'd want to know what we've learned down here. Although one to always distrust a wizard, Eswin nodded his head in surprising agreement, recognizing that Redfern was likely correct. Before we leave the aqueduct, we still need to figure out how to restore the water down here, Cartha commanded. We've come all this way, we can't give up now. That crevice that runs under the bridge near the stairway that led us down here, Sainairs continued, trying to help. That was the Tears of Blue before it was crystallized by the explosion here. By thunder, we just saw what happened when Lomtora blew that magical horn. Redfern stated, a grin on his face. Perhaps the horn can break all the crystallization of the river. Now there was an idea. Wherever we found access to the river, we should blow the horn. Descending some stone steps from the blasted chamber to the east, we soon found ourselves within a massive cavern. Here, what appeared to be a riverbed was cut into the floor of the cavern, running southwest to northeast. However, there was no water here, just the same milky white substrate material clinging to everything and preventing the water from flowing. Approaching the edge of the dry riverbank, we found half a dozen statues standing there, all of them in some sort of mundane pose. We had seen this before, of course, and I knew that these were likely dwarves who had been crystallized as well. Quickly searching the area, we didn't find anything that was particularly interesting or useful. However, when I looked very closely at the crystallized river beyond, I could occasionally see a few air bubbles rising from below, indicating that the river wasn't completely solidified. If only I had something powerful that could destroy the crystallized surface and release the trapped water here. Knowing what to do, I retrieved the magical horn of blasting from my inventory and gave it a solid blow. The resulting wail echoed off the crystallized walls of the cavern, quickly causing the ground to shake. The rumbling intensified until everything was quaking, the noise so loud that we had to cover our ears with our hands. Then, to our amazement, the milky white substrate covering everything cracked, splintered, and shattered, exploding in all directions. The pulverized stone blanketed the entire area, as if a dense fog had just settled in. The shaking finally subsided and we were shocked to see that the water here was free-flowing again. I had destroyed the crystallization over and throughout this section of the river. The river is free again. Ariana shouted, the accomplishment quite significant. At least this section of the river is free, Eswin commented, pointing upriver toward the northeast. The riverbed beneath the bridge that led us here, we need to use the horn there as well. Indeed, our work was not yet done. Returning to the bridge and the stairway leading back to the surface, we could see that the ravine below was now filled with water to the southwest. Use of the horn of blasting had partially restored the underground river to this point. However, the river to the northeast was still blocked here by more of the crystalline stone. Recognizing what to do, I gave the horn another blow, its eerie sound reverberating throughout the bridged area here. The ground shuddered and the bridge swayed, but then the solidified blockage below cracked and splintered, allowing the river to gush forward and flood the ravine to the northeast as well. The Tears of Blue! Ariana shouted with enthusiasm. It's almost been restored. Yes, the river had almost been restored. The bad news was that, far ahead several hundred yards to the northeast, we could see that the flowing water was again being blocked by another large crystal formation, currently out of reach by the horn of blasting. Hence, we would need to find some way to travel along the river, reach that point and blast the ravine again. The good news was that the blasting here had revealed a previously concealed path down to the ravine itself, a relatively safe access point from which we could travel alongside the river below to the point we needed to reach the northeast. Following the underground riverbank northeast several hundred yards, we eventually reached a point in which the river was again blocked by a massive accumulation of crystalline stone, preventing it from continuing further northeast. Hence, even if I blew the horn of blasting here to free up the river, I didn't see how that would help. There didn't seem to be anywhere for the water to go. Now what? Eswin asked, recognizing the end of the ravine here as well. Should we look around? Ariana suggested. At first, searching the area seemed pointless. We were in an underground cave system and there was nowhere left to go. Looking around anyway, Ariana then noticed a dark, empty place in the ceiling further to the northeast, calling for us to investigate. Shining some light up into the hole, I recognized that it was massive, some 50 feet in diameter and going up at least 50 feet, the extent of our light source. Intrigued, we stepped toward the large hole in the ceiling to inspect it further. As Ariana climbed her way underneath the large hole, however, she suddenly started feeling light as a feather. Ordering the party to stay back, she then grabbed a nearby stone and tossed it directly underneath the hole. Rather than falling back to the cavern floor, the pebble instead gently floated upward and quickly out of sight into the darkness of the hole beyond. Now I see. Redfern called out, astonished. There is a huge magical levitation field here which carries the water up and through the power tower above. This is where the tears of blue originate from. Preoccupied with the hole in the cavern roof and the strange levitation effect here, we failed to notice several crystallized columns slowly moving in our direction, stalagmite-like formations that were moving with a mind of their own. Almost without warning, the crystal elementals were upon us, and they were not happy with our presence here. While extremely challenging, we had faced these monsters before and knew how to defeat them. The last of the elementals were soon destroyed and we breathed a sigh of relief, the cavern cold and quiet again. With the crystal elementals out of the way and the levitation field still in place, there was one thing left to do, blow the horn of blasting again. That should release the torrent of water to the southwest and allow it to flood the levitation field, where it should then rise through the power tower and out the eyes of the statue far atop the tower, restoring water to the city. About to blow the horn, it then occurred to me that, from where we were standing, unleashing the full fury of the river could easily drown our entire party in the process. Hence, we wisely retreated from our current position and backtracked a bit, finding some high ground from where we could safely blow the horn. The artifact at the ready, I then blew into the horn of blasting with everything I had. As experienced several times before, the magic of the horn reverberated throughout the cavern here, causing the floor, walls, and ceiling to shake, and for a moment I worried that the entire cavern might come crashing down on us. Then, the crystalline rock holding the river back began to split and collapse, its sound not unlike caving ice that hurt our ears. Moments later, the river lurched forward, crashing past the crumbling whitish stone and immediately entering the levitation field beneath the giant hole in the ceiling, where the water was then magically pulled up like a grand waterspout and into the inky darkness above. The underground river reacted wildly to its sudden freedom, crashing at our feet as it was finally allowed to pass northeast again, up, and through the power tower above. While we had no way of actually witnessing it, I imagined that in a few short moments, the tears of blue would begin pouring through the eyes of the statue atop the power tower again, signaling the return of water to the parched city and ending the deadly drought here within blue. Somehow, some way, we had done it, and thousands of lives would now be spared thanks to our daring and heroism. And that's that. Redfern stated with a grin. I imagine things are looking rather spectacular up there right about now. We should head back, Eswin suggested, nothing more for the party to do here. And what do we do about Lord Huelsman? Kartha asked, wanting to hold the Lord of Blue accountable. The dwarves here deserve to know his part in what happened. Agreed. Sainairs commanded, nodding his head. Supreme Healer Priest Dilt needs to face the truth as well, and we need to tell everyone we can about these wicked paladins of Sisla. My party in complete agreement, we then prepared for the journey back to the surface. Returning to the underground bridge and then ascending the stairway, I reflected on what we had discovered, how Lord Huelsman, short on funds after mismanaging the family fortune over the years, agreed to outfit a small army for the Sislan Way, how Dilt overextended his own magical power that caused a blast that killed everyone in the aqueduct, and how it all led to encasing the aquifer in crystal, blocking its flow. Now that we knew the truth, Huelsman and Dilt had to be exposed for the villains they were. Back to the surface and approaching the door, we noticed lots of footprints in the light sand on the floor, way too many to have been left by just our party. Hence, it was clear that dozens of dwarves had passed through the doorway recently. Stepping out of the door and back into the city, we traveled perhaps 10 feet beyond and turned for the power tower in the distance to the northeast, the underground water gushing through the eyes of the tower at the top once again. It was a grand sight and the entire party smiled and looked to one another in approval and achievement. We had done a great thing and were proud of the accomplishment. Suddenly, a small army of dwarven guards raced to our location from out of nowhere and surrounded my party, leaving us nowhere to run. As if that weren't enough, dozens of human cleric soldiers, wearing perfect, magically enhanced armor and shields bearing the new paladins of Sisla's chevron, surrounded our party as well, hopelessly outnumbering all of us. Eswin reached for his own weapon, but I told the party to stand down, as we would be massacred if it came to blows at this point. Tense moments passed. Brother Sen then stepped out of the crowd of dwarves and humans, again completely healed and his armor once again perfect, as if we had never beaten him down before. Expecting some sort of heckle or speech from the insidious cleric, he merely chuckled at the sight of us before stepping aside. Both Lord Hefralin and Supreme Healer Priest Dilt then appeared, the villainous pair stepping to within 10 feet or so of us, each quite aware of what we had done in the aqueduct and recognizing that we could now easily expose them as well. "Are you here to negotiate?" I asked, believing I had the truth on our side and hoping that we could not only walk out of here with our lives but with some reward as well. "I told you when we first met that your assistance wasn't needed," Lord Hefralin began, addressing me officially. "We let you see for yourselves that all was well here in Blue, now it's time for you to leave." "Yes, we've restored the Tears of Blue," Kartha responded, speaking on my behalf. "We've likely saved everyone here within the city." "You've done no such thing," Supreme Healer Priest Dilt responded, surprising me. "While it's true a rebel faction within the city temporarily halted flow of our aqueduct, they have been soundly defeated and our brave and resourceful soldiers here restored the Tears. You have done nothing." "What?" "We faced crystallized monsters, defeated the paladins of Sisla not once but twice and not only found the Horn of Blasting but used it to clear the aquifer and restore the water." While appalling, it stood to reason that Hefralin, Dilt, and even Brother Sen were all conspiring against us, inventing an alternative set of facts to explain what had happened here in Blue recently. Naturally, I needed to argue our case against them. With the tears flowing again, the rebels put down and the city safe and secure, "You're no longer needed or even welcome within our walls," Lord Hefralin continued, his lie quite convincing. "It's time for all of you to remove yourselves from Blue, and do so now." "He's got this all wrong," Ariana whispered, as shocked as the rest of us. "What's going on? What is going on?" Redfern called out. "Where is Representative Voxar? Surely she'll listen to reason. That lying, self-serving, treasonous witch has been forever banished from the Cyan Desert," Supreme Healer Priest Dilt returned, his hatred for the truistic on display again. "If she or any of her villainous circle members ever return to Blue, our paladins of Sisla will execute them on the spot." "The circle won't stand for that," Redfern responded, astonished. "You're inviting war with the circle." Dilt slowly grinned, apparently war with the circle was exactly what he wanted. "Do you really want to take on the full might and force of the inner circle?" Redfern cried, his passion perhaps outweighing his common sense. "Provoke the circle, and they'll reduce this little oasis you have here back to just sand and dust." "For the last time," Lord Hefralin huffed. "Blue is safe and secure. You are no longer welcome. Leave now, or we will make you leave." Eyeing Hefralin, Dilt, Sen, and all the guards here and recognizing their angry, militant, self-serving mindset, the smart play was to agree to leave the city, despite all the lies. Yet all I could do was stare at these evil, selfish men, holding our own against them and refusing to leave. Hefralin's response was to draw his weapon, causing all the guards encircling us to do the same. I was taking the party down a very dangerous path. Despite the concerned stares of several of my heroes, I then opened up, telling Hefralin and Dilt exactly what I thought. "So you win, for today. But history is full of bullies like you, closed minds who knew only how to take, how to dominate others, how to spread their rhetoric like poison. And in the end, every bully is taken down and exposed for what they are, and you three, Hefralin, Dilt and Sen, will one day soon be taken down as well." "Brother Sen," Lord Hefralin commanded, the Dwarven King most agitated with my party now. "Have your paladins escort these heroes to the front gate. If they offer any resistance, cut them down and hang their corpses out in the desert for all to see." Sen grinned again, then ordered a platoon of paladins to lead us away. Our time here in Blue was coming to an abrupt end. Lord Hefralin then took a few more steps directly to me, a cocky grin on his face I so wished I could slap off. "One more thing. There is the matter of our beloved artifact that you stole while down in the aqueduct. Hand it over immediately." The Dwarven King was referring, of course, to the Horn of Blasting, something that did indeed belong to the dwarves. Huelsman reached out, waiting for me to place the horn into his hand. With no other choice, I reached into my pack, retrieved the artifact and handed it to Lord Huelsman, the dwarf snatching it away as he returned to Dilt and Brother Sen. And with that, the dwarven guards separated and Brother Sen's paladins led us away. The encounter with Lord Huelsman and Supreme Healer Priest Dilt concluded. The two villains had won the day, but, for some reason at least, it appeared they were allowing us to live. As we passed through the city, we took consolation in the fact that most of the dwarven townspeople here seemed to have returned to a normal way of life. The drought had ended, everyone had consumed all the water they needed, and I smiled with the thought of all the lives we had saved. Hence, while we were being unceremoniously booted out of Blue, we had done some substantial good here as well, and that's what was important. Brother Sen and his Sislan paladins finally escorted us to the main gate of Blue, another dozen or so dwarven guards watching our every move from above. As we approached, the gate leading out of the city was slowly opened and we were further escorted back out onto the road leading east, an unceremonious end to our time here within Blue. Back outside the city just beyond the main gate, I spotted dozens upon dozens of waterskins lying on the road here, apparently ours for the taking. Indeed, Brother Sen commented a moment later, pointing to the skins. There is enough water here to last you several weeks out in the hot sands. Go back to wherever you came from and don't ever come back to Blue again. The apparent gift was quite surprising and I half wondered if the water was poisoned perhaps as we began to stuff it into our packs. You seem rather gracious, Cartha responded, addressing an issue I had been thinking about as well. Down in the aqueduct you tried to kill us, twice. Yet now you're letting us go, even providing water for our escape. Why? Now that the rebel dwarves have been captured and our water supply restored, you're no threat to us, Brother Sen replied, a wry smile on his face. Besides, the world needs to know about the paladins of Sisla. Go tell everyone that we have arrived to enforce the will of Sisla. Are you sure you want that? Sainairs asked, already developing a hatred for Brother Sen and his self-serving paladins. You're inviting civil war within the church, we won't speak well of you. Brother Sen chuckled again in his zealous pride, seeing our party as a worthless collection of inept fools. As for being gracious, all of you are just a tool we're choosing to use at this moment. Once you've done our bidding, we will dispose of you like anything else that's become useless. Sen then leaned over and whispered in my ear, leaving me with one final insult. And mark my words, we will dispose of all of you. The narcissistic cleric grinned again, ordered for the portcullis to be temporarily lifted, then escorted his paladins back into the city, leaving our party out in the desert and almost a 2 weeks march back to the bandit camp to the east. All of us sneered at Brother Sen as he departed, perhaps hoping that a confrontation with him again was in our party's near future. And that's a wrap of episode number 26, Tears of Betrayal. Expect additional episodes every few weeks as the story continues.